You're still calling it love, but Allah already called it over. And the reason your soul feels heavy, the reason nothing feels peaceful, is because you're still trying to resurrect a bond that was only sent to test, not to stay. You're not waiting anymore. You're disobeying a closed door. 1. Allah removed it because it was quietly poisoning you. There's a kind of grief that doesn't make a sound. It doesn't scream into the night. It doesn't break down in front of people. It doesn't post quotes on social media. It just lives quietly inside your chest. It hides behind your smile. It shows up when you're alone. And it whispers things like, maybe it wasn't supposed to end. Maybe they'll come back. Maybe Allah will still make a way. But deep down, you already know. That person, that relationship, that season of life you keep replaying like a movie in your head, it's already been removed. And not by accident. Not by people. By Allah. But your heart hasn't accepted that yet. So you keep going back. Not physically, but emotionally, mentally, spiritually. You go back to old conversations, old texts, old hopes. You sit in the memory of who they were to you, as if your love can rewrite Allah's decision. And that's why you're tired. That's why your soul feels heavy, even when nothing is happening, because your heart is still fighting to hold on to something Allah has already taken out of your hands. And you don't understand it, because what you felt was real. The connection was deep. The dreams were sincere. You told yourself, this was the plan, this was the person, this was the answer. But just because you wanted it to last, doesn't mean it was written to. You see, what you don't realize is that while you were falling in love, your soul was slowly falling apart. You didn't notice it, because the pain was quiet. It didn't come from arguments. It came from what it was doing to your iman. You started delaying salah just to text them longer. You started losing focus in your dua because your heart was full of them, not Allah. You were giving your soul to someone who could never hold it the way your Creator does. And Allah saw what you didn't. He saw the nights you stopped crying to Him because you were crying over them. He saw the way your light was dimming. He saw how their presence in your life was slowly taking His place in your heart. And because He loves you more than you understand, He stepped in. He removed it. Suddenly, sharply, completely, and it felt like the ground disappeared beneath you. You called it heartbreak, but it was a rescue, because you were too deep in something that was killing you from the inside, while convincing you it was love. That's why it ended the way it did, without full answers, without full closure, because if He let you keep understanding it, you'd keep justifying it, you'd keep chasing it, you'd keep bleeding for it. But Allah had to cut it, so you could come back to Him. And now, your soul is tired, because instead of healing, you're trying to fix what Allah already broke for a reason. You keep asking, why did they leave? Why did it end like that? Why didn't Allah make it work? But the real question is, why are you still loving what Allah already protected you from? You don't need to keep reopening that door. It's closed, locked, by divine hands. Because Allah knew something you didn't. He knew that if it continued, it would have cost you more than your peace. It would have cost you you. And now the ache in your chest isn't from what happened. It's from your refusal to let it be over. You're not tired from heartbreak. You're tired from resisting Allah's mercy. He removed it not to break you, but to rebuild you, to bring you back to the prayer mat, to remind you how sujood felt when your heart wasn't divided, to show you how real love is only safe when it's built with His blessing. So let him close this chapter. Let him write something new. Because as long as you're clinging to what he removed, you're delaying what he's preparing. You weren't made to carry this pain forever. You were made to rise from it. Let go. Not because it wasn't real, but because Allah already decided it wasn't meant to stay. And peace, real peace, will enter your heart the moment you stop begging for what Allah already walked away from your story. 2. He's silent because he's protecting you from yourself. You've been wondering why Allah isn't answering, why every dua about them feels like it's disappearing into the sky, why the signs feel unclear, why everything is just quiet. And maybe that silence is starting to feel like rejection, like you're being ignored, like Allah doesn't hear you anymore. But He hears you. He hears every word. He knows exactly what you're asking. And He knows that what you're asking for isn't truly what you need. That's why He's quiet. Not because He's far, but because He's protecting you from the very thing you keep begging Him for. Sometimes silence is the most merciful answer. Because if Allah responded to your cries the way you wanted, if He gave you back the person you keep dreaming of, if He reopened the door you won't stop knocking on, you would get what you want, but you'd lose who you're becoming. And He loves you too much to let that happen. Because only He knows what you were like when they had your heart. Only He knows how far your soul was slipping, how dependent you became on their voice, how small your world got when it started revolving around a person instead of your Creator. You stopped feeling alive in your own presence. You stopped remembering who you were before them. You stopped praying like you used to, because they became the focus of your heart. And still, here you are, whispering their name into your sajda, trying to convince Allah to change His plan, instead of surrendering to the protection you can't yet understand. But He's still quiet, because He knows if He speaks too soon, you'll twist His signs to fit your desires. You'll see what you want to see, not what's true. So He protects you by staying silent, because in His silence, you're forced to stop talking and start listening to your soul. And your soul is tired. It's tired of being pulled between what it wants and what it was saved from. It's tired of pretending this was love, when deep down it knows this was a test. You think if Allah gave you a yes, your heart would finally rest. But He knows that kind of love would only lead you deeper into confusion, because the one you're asking for isn't asking for Him. The one you're chasing is distracting you from yourself. And even though it hurts, even though you cry late at night and stare at the ceiling wondering why, Allah's silence is actually the loudest form of love you've ever received, because He's standing between you and a decision that would have destroyed your growth. He's protecting the healed version of you that you haven't met yet. He's safeguarding the you that finally walks in peace without being pulled back into emotional cycles that feel like love but leave you empty. This silence isn't a punishment. It's a pause. It's a moment of protection where He's holding you still, until your heart is strong enough to understand the wisdom in the no. Because once upon a time, you asked Him to guide you. You asked Him to protect you from harm. You asked Him to pull you closer to Him no matter what it took. And now He's doing exactly that. But you didn't think the path back to Him would come through losing someone who once felt like everything. So He stays quiet, not because He's ignoring you, but because He's rebuilding you in silence. The healing you want will not come from getting them back. It will come from realizing you never needed what He removed. And when you're finally ready to stop begging for it, you'll hear something louder than words. You'll feel peace again. Real peace. Because you'll know Allah didn't go silent to hurt you. He went silent so you could finally hear the sound of your own soul returning to Him. 3. Your heart is starving because you're still feeding it what's gone. You keep wondering why nothing feels fulfilling anymore, why the days blur together, why your energy feels low even when you're doing nothing, why no matter how much you rest, you still feel tired, deep in your chest, not in your body, but in your being. That tiredness isn't from work. It's not from stress. It's because your heart is starving, starving for something real, starving for something alive, starving for something it was created to receive, but hasn't tasted in a long time. Because you're still feeding it what's already gone. You're still sitting at a table where the food was removed a long time ago, and wondering why your soul feels empty. You replay old memories and call it comfort. You talk to yourself using their voice in your mind. You reread old messages, not to move on, but to feel something again. But here's the truth your soul already knows. You're not remembering them. You're trying to keep them alive. You're trying to keep something breathing that Allah already let die. And now you're wondering why your heart feels like it's breaking more each day. But it's not breaking. It's starving, because you're forcing it to survive on emotional leftovers that were never meant to last this long. You're calling it love, but your soul is calling it starvation, because real love doesn't drain your energy. It doesn't replay itself until your spirit gets dizzy. It doesn't sit in your chest like a weight you can't drop. Real love, the kind that Allah writes with His mercy, brings expansion, not exhaustion, clarity, not confusion, nourishment, not numbness. But what you're holding on to isn't that. It's emotional nostalgia. It's an illusion your heart created, so it wouldn't have to feel alone. And now you're feeding that illusion every day and wondering why your soul keeps shrinking. You wake up tired. You fall asleep more tired, because deep down, your heart knows you're still giving attention to something that already left you hungry the first time. But here's the part you don't say out loud. You're scared to stop feeding it, because if you stop, you're afraid you'll feel empty. You're afraid that letting it go will make you feel even worse. But the truth is, you're not afraid of emptiness. You're afraid of silence, because silence will force you to face what's really happening inside. That your love for them was real, but it wasn't sustainable. It wasn't spiritually safe. It wasn't sent to stay. Allah didn't let it continue, because He knew you were pouring all your energy into something that would never fill you back. And now He's waiting for you to walk away from the table, waiting for you to stop feeding your heart with memories that have no soul left in them, waiting for you to look up and finally realize you were made to be filled by Him, not drained by people who were only written for a season. You think you're still in love, but you're actually just starving. And love, real love, won't feel like this. It won't feel like begging. It won't feel like guessing. It won't feel like dragging your heart through every memory, just to feel like you matter again. So stop feeding your heart what Allah already removed. Because when you finally stop, you'll feel something sacred return. Not their presence, not the past, but your own soul. The one you abandoned when you kept chasing what was never written to stay. And that soul, when it reconnects with Allah fully again, will feel full in a way that no memory ever could. 4. You're not tired from letting go. You're tired from holding on. You keep telling yourself that you're tired from trying to let go. But that's not the truth, is it? Because you haven't really let go. Not fully, not silently, not in the way that frees your heart instead of just distracting it. You've told people you've moved on. You've posted quotes about healing. You've even said, Alhamdulillah out loud, but deep inside, you're still holding on. And that is where your exhaustion is coming from. You're not tired because of the letting go. You're tired because of how tightly you're still gripping something that Allah has already asked you again and again to release. You're still holding on with your heart, with your thoughts, with your imagination, with your expectations. You've built a second home inside a memory, and now you can't understand why real life feels empty. Every time you try to move forward, you look over your shoulder. Every time you try to pray for something new, your heart interrupts the dua with someone old. Every time you try to close that chapter, you reread the same page in silence before sleeping. And it's draining you. Slowly, quietly, completely. You keep saying you don't know what's wrong, why everything feels harder now, why nothing brings the same joy, why you can't stay consistent with your worship anymore. But here's the hidden truth. You're using all your strength, not to grow, but to hold on to something Allah already asked you to outgrow. And that's not strength. That's survival. You're not healing, you're hiding from the heartbreak. Because the moment you truly let go, you're afraid you'll have to face the pain fully. You'll have to accept that it's really over. You'll have to admit to yourself that they're not coming back, and that maybe they never should have had that much of you in the first place. So instead of releasing, you stay stuck in a cycle. You move forward during the day, but fall apart in your thoughts at night. You convince yourself that holding on is proof of love, but it's really proof of fear. Fear that if you truly let them go, you'll lose a part of yourself with them. Fear that you'll be left with nothing but silence. Fear that the story won't have a happy ending unless they're in it. But that's the thing, isn't it? Allah already wrote your story, and if they were meant to be in the next chapter, He wouldn't have removed them from this one. You're not tired from surrendering. You're tired because you haven't surrendered yet. Because surrender is painful, but it's quick. Holding on is what makes it long, what makes it ache, what steals your light day by day until you forget what it feels like to be whole. So, ask yourself, what would happen if you stopped gripping the past so tightly? What would happen if you trusted that Allah closed that door? Because what's behind it can no longer serve your soul. What would happen if you finally let go? Not just with your words, but with your will? Letting go won't destroy you. Holding on already is. Let go, because the love that Allah keeps in your life will never require you to sacrifice your sanity, your peace, or your soul. The exhaustion will leave the moment your resistance does. You don't need to keep bleeding for a chapter that's already written in ink. Let it end. Let it be sacred. Let it go. Because real peace doesn't come from fixing the past. It comes from finally having the courage to stop holding it, like it still belongs in your hands. 5. You cried for them more than you ever cried in sujood. There's something you haven't said out loud, not to your friends, not even to yourself, but deep down your soul knows it's true. You cried for them more than you ever cried in sujood. You gave your tears to a human. You gave your nights to a memory. You gave your emotions to someone who was never meant to sit on the throne of your heart. And now you feel empty, not just because they left, but because you were building your life around something or someone that was never built to carry you. When they were in your life, you made space for them in your heart. But that space wasn't yours to give. It belonged to Allah. He gave you that heart as a trust. To pour love into it, not worship. To protect it, not place it in the hands of someone who could walk away with it at any moment. But you didn't know. You thought love meant giving everything. You thought attachment meant sincerity. You thought loyalty meant staying loyal to your pain too. So when they pulled away, you fell apart. And instead of falling into sujood, you fell deeper into the loss. You didn't cry to Allah first. You cried for them. You begged them. You broke over them. You asked Allah to bring them back. But you didn't ask Him to bring you back. And that's why the pain hasn't left. Not because the love wasn't real, but because your love for them began to replace your love for the one who gave you the ability to love in the first place. You're tired because your tears are going to the wrong place. Your pain is being poured into what's gone, instead of being placed in the hands of the one who never left. You keep saying, "They meant so much to me." But how much does Allah mean to you right now? You say, "They changed my life." But did they bring you closer to Allah? Or further, did you cry more when they hurt you than you ever cried when you missed a prayer? Did you beg them to stay, but never begged Allah to stay close to your heart? You're not broken because of what they did. You're broken because of what you stopped doing when you started chasing them instead of returning to Him. But even in your detour, even when you misplaced your loyalty, even when you turned your face toward the creation instead of the Creator, Allah didn't turn away. He waited. He watched. He listened to your cries, even when they weren't meant for Him. And now He's gently reminding you, the peace you're seeking, it's not in being loved by them again. It's in being forgiven by me. It's in knowing that the tears you used to shed for people are now being placed where they can actually heal you. So ask yourself, what would your life look like if you gave Allah the same passion you gave them? If you cried for His nearness the way you cried when they grew distant? If you begged Him to stay in your life with the same desperation you used to beg someone else to come back? Because the truth is, they were just a mirror, a test, a moment in your story. But Allah is your entire story. He saw what they never saw. He stayed through what they would have run from. He forgave what you couldn't even admit to yourself. And still, He's waiting for you to cry. Not for them, not for what's gone, but for Him. Because when you do, the tears will stop feeling heavy. Your chest will stop aching. Your nights will stop dragging. Because the moment your tears fall for the right reason, they begin to wash away the wrong attachment. So cry. But this time, cry in sujood, where your pain won't echo into silence, but rise up to the one who's been waiting to heal what your soul didn't even know how to say out loud. 6. Allah let you lose them to save your akhirah. You thought the loss was about this life, about love, about someone you couldn't keep. But what if I told you this wasn't about your dunya at all? What if Allah let you lose them, not because He wanted to hurt your heart, but because He wanted to save your akhirah? Because the truth is, you were slipping, slowly, quietly, dangerously. You didn't notice it. You were so caught up in the feelings, the connection, the excitement, the late-night talks, the way your heart skipped when they texted back. You were calling it love, but your soul was getting weaker. Your focus was shifting. Your priorities were changing. Your worship was becoming hollow. And maybe you didn't feel it happening, because dunya has a way of keeping you entertained while it steals your hereafter. But Allah saw it. He saw the things you stopped doing. He saw the way you rushed your prayers, or skipped them entirely just to stay on a call. He saw how your du'as became about them, not Him. How your love became your distraction. How your heart was no longer facing the Qibla, but chasing a person who was never your destination. And so He stepped in, not because He was angry with you, but because He was jealous over your soul. because He created you for more than this. Because He loved you enough to interrupt your destruction. So He pulled them away. Suddenly, sharply, painfully. You didn't understand it. You cried. You begged. You felt like the world was ending. But Allah knew. Your dunya, heartbreak, was the only thing that could wake your heart up before your akhirah slipped through your fingers completely. Because, let's be honest, if He hadn't taken them away, you wouldn't be watching this right now. You wouldn't be seeking Him again. You wouldn't be praying with tears in your eyes, feeling the ache of returning home to your Lord. Sometimes, the most painful moment of your life becomes the beginning of your salvation. And this is that moment. It wasn't about losing a person. It was about losing yourself in them, and Allah refusing to let you go without a fight. So He broke your heart to rebuild your soul. He shattered your illusion to protect your reality. He closed the door you refused to walk away from because He saw the fire you were headed toward. You thought they were the one, but Allah knew they were only the test. They were never your destination. They were a crossroad, a fork in your journey, a soul detour that would have taken you further and further from the very Jannah you've been praying for your entire life. And so, He pulled you back, through tears, through silence, through a kind of loneliness only He can fill. Not because you were unworthy, but because you were too precious to be left in the wrong hands. Allah let you lose them, so you could find your way back to Him. Because what would it benefit you to win someone's heart, but lose your soul? To gain a relationship, but lose your identity? To fall in love, but fall out of divine favor? You see, this wasn't a punishment. It was a rescue mission. And Allah didn't wait for you to realize it. He intervened before your soul went too far. So if you're sitting there asking, why did this happen to me? The answer is, because your akhirah was on the line. And your Lord loves you enough to break your heart in dunya, just to protect you from something far worse. Let that sink in. Sometimes Allah's most painful no is His loudest yes to your eternal peace. So breathe. Cry if you need to, but don't question His wisdom, because the soul you're rebuilding now will thank Him forever for the heartbreak that woke it up before it was too late. 7. What you thought was a bond was actually a test of surrender. You called it a bond. You thought it was meant to be. The way you connected, the way your soul felt seen, the way your heart softened around them. You convinced yourself, this must be a sign. This must be from Allah. This has to be something divine. But what you didn't realize is that not every deep feeling comes from a divine source. Sometimes, what feels like a bond is actually a test of where your loyalty truly lies, a test of what you're willing to surrender when Allah asks for it back. Because love, real love, isn't just about what you feel. It's about what you're willing to sacrifice when the call comes. And for some people, Allah doesn't test your heart through loss. He tests it through attachment. He gives you someone who fits in all the right places. Accept your destiny. He places someone in your path who awakens every part of you. Accept the part that bows in full surrender. And you don't realize it until later, until the pain begins to burn through every illusion you created with them. Because you were so focused on the feeling, you forgot to check the direction. Were they bringing you closer to Allah, or deeper into distraction? Were they helping you purify your heart, or were they silently replacing the one who owns it? You thought the depth of the connection meant it was meant to last. But depth doesn't always mean destiny. Sometimes, the deeper the pull, the more dangerous the detachment. And Allah knew it. He saw how you were starting to place them above your own well-being, above your worship, above your emotional balance, above your own identity. You became someone you didn't even recognize, just to keep something that was never written. And when the time came, He asked you to surrender, not just walk away, but to release with trust. And that was the real test. Would you obey Allah? Even if your heart didn't understand, would you walk away? Even when your soul was screaming to stay? Because that's the hardest kind of obedience. Giving up something that feels like it belongs to you, when Allah says it doesn't. You thought it was a bond, but it was a lesson about spiritual maturity, about letting love be beautiful, even if it's not forever, about choosing what's right with Allah over what feels right to your emotions. And it hurts. It hurts because it felt real, because you were willing, because you gave, because you imagined a future that was never written. But don't confuse depth with permanence. Don't confuse timing with tawfiq. And don't confuse a test with a promise. Allah doesn't always send what feels divine to stay. Sometimes He sends it to reveal where your heart truly is, to expose whether you love Him enough, to let go of what you thought you couldn't live without. And now that it's gone, you have two choices. Keep calling it fate and hold on to the pain, or call it a test and surrender, not in defeat, but in peace. Because if Allah asked for it back, it means it was never yours in the first place. And maybe, just maybe, He's preparing to give you something even deeper, even purer, even more aligned with your soul and your akhirah. But only after you prove to Him that you can let go, when He says, "This one was only sent to bring you back to me." 8. Peace begins the moment you stop begging for what's already closed. You keep asking for peace. You say you just want to feel okay again. You just want the pain to stop. You just want to understand why it ended, why they left, why Allah didn't let it last. But what if the peace you're begging for has already arrived? And what if the only reason you haven't felt it is because your hands are still pulling at a door Allah already closed? You see, peace doesn't come from getting what you want. It comes from surrendering what you were never meant to hold. And right now, you're holding on to something that no longer fits your future. You're clinging to a chapter that Allah has already written the last sentence of. But instead of closing the book, you keep rereading the same paragraph, hoping it ends differently, hoping somehow the story will change if you cry enough, pray enough, wait long enough. But the door is closed. And not because you weren't good enough, not because you failed, but because that door no longer leads to where Allah is taking you next. He's protecting you. He's redirecting you. But your peace can't enter your heart. If your hands are still pounding on a wall, He's sealed shut. Every time you beg for what's behind you, you're telling Allah you don't trust what's ahead of you. You're not just grieving what ended. You're resisting what's next. And that's why you feel stuck. Not because of the heartbreak, but because of the attachment to what Allah already ended. You've confused patience with resistance. You've confused faith with begging. But true faith doesn't sound like, "Ya Allah, please bring them back." It sounds like, "Ya Allah, I miss them, but I trust your plan more than my feelings." Peace begins when you stop trying to rewrite a story that Allah, in His wisdom, already concluded. And sometimes the closure isn't in the conversation. It's in the decision, the divine decision. The moment Allah said, "No more, not this, not them, not now," And it's not your job to understand every detail. It's your job to trust that the author of your life didn't remove something that was essential for your soul. Because whatever is meant for your soul won't leave you this confused. It won't exhaust you like this. It won't make you beg to be chosen. It won't take this much convincing to stay. So maybe peace has been waiting at your door for months now, but your heart has been too loud with longing to let it in. Maybe you're not actually waiting on someone to return. Maybe peace is waiting on you to stop asking for a door that's no longer yours to open. It's hard. It's lonely. But what's lonelier is spending your whole life begging for what Allah has already erased from your destiny. So let go. Not because it didn't matter, but because your peace matters more, your future matters more, and Allah matters most. Because when He removes, He replaces, and when He closes, He protects. And when you finally stop knocking, you'll realize something sacred. That silence you were afraid of? It was peace waiting to be heard. And when it enters, you'll breathe again. Not because they came back, but because you finally did. Your soul isn't tired because of life. It's tired because you keep chasing something Allah already erased from your story. Let it go. You're not letting go of love. You're letting go of what was quietly breaking you. You're not losing your future. You're finally making space for it. And I promise you this: what's written for your heart by the one who created it will never feel this heavy to hold. So breathe, stand up from this chapter, and trust what's coming, even if you don't see it yet, because Allah never removes without preparing something far more real to arrive.